Today, the Mythic Society is organizing a memorial endowment lecture. This is Professor M.B. Krishna Rao Memorial Lecture and Shri Orugunti Ramachandraya Memorial Endowment Lecture. Both lectures are combined into one. And we are having Shri Halley Goswami as the main speaker for this endowment lecture. And the subject is Gaudiya Vaishnavism, its role in fighting against the invaders and sustaining Bengal's Sanatanic spirit. And Dr. M.B. Krishna Rao was a towering figure in the Karnataka's historiographical landscape. In fact, he was born in Kathasandra, very close in Tumkur district, close to Bangalore. He graduated from the Mysore Maharaja's College. He did his MA there. Later on, he went to London and did his D.Litt on a thesis called Origin and Evolution of Liberalism in the 19th Century India under Harold Lasky. Later, he returned back to Maharaja's College and he was the professor of history and political science there. Later on, his literary contributions have been many, particularly related to Karnataka. He wrote on the Gangas of the Talakad, the glimpses of the Karnataka, the history of freedom movement in Karnataka, Karnataka Itihasa Darshana, and he wrote a biography, number of them, out of which Bengalurian Sthapaka Kempegowda biography was one of the important ones. He was rather a pillar of number of institutions like the Mythic Society. He was the president, the Royal Asiatic Society, as well as the Indian Historical Records Commission. He was the president of all these three. So he mainly championed the Kannada historiography, weaving the epigraphy, numismatics and cultural narratives in his literature. This is about Dr. M.B. Krishna Rao. And one more endowment memorial is Professor Orugunti Ramachandraya. He was basically a freedom fighter and archaeologist, and he was a specialist in the Vijayanagara history. In fact, he was from Nellore, and at a very young age, he joined into the freedom movement. He participated in the Salt Satyagraha, in the Kakinada bomb case. In fact, he was in jail for about 6 months, and later he pursued his studies. He did his MA at Krishnadevaraya foreign policy, and he did his PhD in London under Gordon, Child and Zenure. He also worked along with Mortimer Wheeler at Harappa on excavations, and in Andhra Pradesh, few sites like Salihundam and Jami, he did excavations. He was an archaeologist too. As a professor, he guided lots of PhD students, particularly on the Vijayanagara Empire. He wrote on the Tuluva dynasty at Vijayanagara and on the Shatavahanas and the successors also. He did a lot of work in Telugu, and particularly he was the president of the South Indian History Congress, and he was a follower of the Ramana Maharshi. In fact, he stayed in the Ramana Maharshi ashram, and he was one who blended history, spirituality and activism. In fact, in 1994, he was felicitated by the Mythic Society. So this is a brief about the two endowment memorial lectures today. Now I would like to introduce the chief guest, Shri Halley Goswami. Halley Goswami is based out of Kolkata. He is a self-taught artist, a researcher and a scholar, particularly specializing in sacred arts, reviving traditional Bengali painting styles like the Patachitra and the Palayara influences. In fact, he has a legal degree. Actually, he is a LLB from Kolkata, but probably he has decided to forget about his legal practices and jump into the religious themed works, blending Bengalis, probably Buddhist, Hindu, tantric conditions and things like that. Goswami creates intricate Durga idols and murals, and in fact it's all emphasizing the pre-Islamic Bengal art forms. He's very critical about the Eurocentric artistic views and advocates the Indian perspective through his lectures, exhibitions and Instagrams. He works they are in galleries and cultural events, and they preserve the endangering idealisms amid the modern realisms. He is very, very passionate about the Bengal history, and his expertise lies in the art historical revival, and he is a scholar basically on the Indian culture and history and a motivational speaker. He teaches philosophy of Ramakrishna and Vivekananda. He also extends the history and evolution of the art of Bengal, the Gaudiya Vaishnava traditions, the ritual traditions, and the contribution of Bengal towards the fight against invaders. Dr. Shatavadani R. Ganesh, I'll give a very, very, very brief introduction about him because he needs no introduction. So, a renowned scholar, polyglot, and a master of ancient Indian art, Avadhana. He hails from Kolar. He is engineering graduate in mechanical engineering from UEC, MSc in metallurgy from Indian Institute of Science, MA Sanskrit and DLit in Kannada University, Hampi. He'll DLit from Kannada University of Hampi, particularly on the Avadhana in Kannada. He has performed over 1,300 Avadhanas, 5 Shatavadanas with 100 questions, and fluent in about 18 plus languages like Sanskrit, Prakrit, Pali, Tamil, Greek, Latin, Italian. He has authored a number of Sanskrit and Kannada works, more than 8,000 plus lectures, and particularly innovated formats like solo Yakshagana and Ranga Nritya fusions. He is a recipient of many awards, Rajyotsava Award at the youngest age of 29, if I am right, I remember so, in the year 1992. Sahitya Akademi Award, Badarayana Vyasa Puraskara, Kalidasa Award, and now the Padma Bhushana, recipient of the Padma Bhushana Award. Sir, we are very much pleased that you are here today and you are with us. On behalf of Mythic Society, on behalf of every one of you, I welcome you, sir. Once again, I welcome all the audience, scholars who are here. If I go on naming, I think I'll have to name most of the people here. Okay. So, once again, on behalf of Mythic Society, I welcome you all for this evening program, and I hand over the stage to Shri Halley Goswami.
A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, everybody assembled. My namaskar and my heartfelt thanks to people of Bangalore for the warmth, being the host that they are. That I can't thank enough. My thanks to the President of Mythic Society, S. Ravi, Honorary Secretary, the Mythic Society, Padma Vibhushan Shatavadani, Dr. R. Ganesh, Arjun Bharadwaj, and Sagar Mehta, and especially to Dr. Ganesh for supporting an unknown person like myself. So that's a huge thing. Today my topic of discussion is Gaudiya Vaishnavism and how it shaped or helped the Sanatana Dharma to thrive. But before we get into that, I have to speak a little about why it's definitely political, religious and societal topic, but they are not unrelated, because unless you have the politics of a land stable, you don't have the arts flourishing. So they are, the Rajtantra and everything is kind of correlated, and we'll just get to see how Bengal evolved over the ages. So when we think of Bengal, the thing that comes to our mind is the Bengal Renaissance, all these figures which shaped modern India, Vidyasagar, Ram Mohan Roy, Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, Rabindranath, Vivekananda, and all that. So there was a time when all of these figures in different fields, literature and all, they all were born in Bengal, and that is collectively called as the Bengal Renaissance. But the actual Renaissance, I believe, began even earlier. That was with the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That is not really looked, because the darkness that preceded this Renaissance, the colonial Renaissance, was much less as compared to the darkness that preceded the coming of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we'll dwell on that. But before we dwell on that, our presentation is divided into two parts. The first part is the glorious Bengal, and then in the middle stands the fall, the invasions, and then the second part is how Bengal kind of revived itself, its Sanatanic spirit. So, the first part, good times produce weak men. so when you are, and also good times attract invaders. Because prosperity is one of the most integral things of, which attracts it. And this is not for India, any civilization. We have seen that in Egypt, we have seen that in Rome, the barbarians, and so-called, well, it goes on. So the Pala Empire, which roughly ruled 400 years from the 8th century up until the 11th century. So that was the time of the Palas. Pala as in Pal, Gopala, not Pala, Pala. So they were the imperial rulers. But back in those times, Bengal and Bihar were not two separate entities. So the entire tract of land from Myanmar to Tripura up till what is now UP was part of the same cultural, social, religious diaspora. Even the script and the language was same. The division of Bihar and Bengal happened much later. So, and the capital city was in Gaura, which is now corresponding roughly to the Malda district of Bengal. So this is a reconstruction of the Nalanda University as it might have looked. It's done by a friend from Bangladesh, my friend. So if you are looking Shakti, so you would feel happy seeing this. I've used his slide. This was the extent of the Pala Empire in the heights. But of course, the empire, as we all know, all empires shrinks and, it waxes and wanes over time. So at the heydays, it went up that it covered that big a land. But the capital was at the city of Gauda. This was the royal emblem. Now the Palas were the last Buddhist empire of India. But this Buddhism is not similar to the modern Buddhism with all its nuances. It was a very syncretic Buddhism, like very similar to what you find in Nepal today. If you go to Nepal, in fact, the Nepalese and Tibetan Buddhisms are continuations of the Pala Gharana Sampradaya of Buddhism. So in this Buddhism, both Hindus and Buddhists worship the same deities. Just like if you go to Nepal, the Kumari is worshipped, venerated by both the communities. So it was that kind of Buddhism. The Pala kings used to marry Chalukyas, Rashtrakutas and all. And most of their the queens were Hindus. Some of them took Shaiva Diksha. They gave land grants to Brahmins, which we know from the copper plate inscriptions. So they were different sort of a Buddhist kings. And this seal, you see the two deer and the wheel, the Dharmachakra Pravartana, which based on the Sarnath, Buddha's first teaching at Sarnath. That is their seal, which you can still see when you go to the Tibetan monasteries, be it in Dharamshala, you will find the same logo, the continuation of the Pala emblem. This is the copper plate inscription by Samrat Devapala, made at Nalanda. This is the Mahabodhi temple before its present restoration. This is also a Pala feat of art. Well, it was built much earlier, but for the last 400 years it was developed and reshaped by the Pala emperors. This is a stupa, which usually used to house some sort of an artifact or reliquary of Buddha, asthi or something. This is the votive stupa of the Pala period. This is the metal casting. I'm just briefly going through the Pala period just to show how influential and glorious it was before we shift to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is a metal casting in Pala and Sena times of goddess Mahishasuramardini. And one thing I would like to point out is sometimes we say Buddhist influence, but I think the correct way of explaining art would be based on region than on religion, because the same style was followed by Buddhists and also by Hindus and also by Jains. So would it be fair to call it Buddhist influence? I think no, it's maybe Indian influence, Eastern influence. That's how you should interpret it. This is a silver Vishnu Murti unearthed from Bangladesh. And in Bengal idiom, Vishnu is supported by not by Shri and Bhu, but Shri and Saraswati, which finds a mention in Devi Bhagavatam. So that is the base of the pramana of this iconography. This is the Pala manuscript paintings. They say that it's the earliest miniature paintings of India, but I think they're the earliest existing miniature paintings of India, rather than being the earliest miniature. And most of them survived because these manuscripts were taken to Tibet. So the majority of manuscripts were discovered from the Royal Library of Nepal and Tibet, hardly one or two from Bengal. So because during the invasions, they all fled to Tibet. This is Pala Vishnu, very popular iconography. A few temples, just a select few temples survive, mostly in ruins. And this is one small, and mostly the small temples, which were tucked away in remote corners of Bengal, only those survives. The great viharas and stupas are all wiped off. This is on banks of river Kamsavati. But we have village names, just like you see Deul Ghata. So we have Deul, Joda Deul, lots of village names with the word Deul. So which means sometimes Deul existed. Deul is basically the Shikhara of Nagara temple architecture. Just after the Palas, there was one employees in the court of Pala who came from the Karnataka region. They were the Sena dynasty. After all, they came to the throne of Gauda. They became Gaudeshwara, and that was the last. And they were Hindus. So after some Buddhist rule, they were very dominant Hindu rulers. Their emblem was Sadashiva, and they also patronized Hinduism a lot. And a lot of, Lakshman Sena was the last king, and eventually. Although Lakshman Sena was really brave, this is attested in the works of the Tariq-e-Minaz and all, the Islamic rulers attest to his braveness, but he finally succumbed to Bhaktiar Khilji's invasion in 13th century. So when this Islamic invasion started, the classical Bengal which you see and which influenced areas as far as Southeast Asia, artistically in terms of art, and also Tibet and Nalanda, Vikramshila, all these universities were running under the patronage of the Pala Empire. So that system entirely collapsed. So for 200 years, we don't really have much of art going on. We have some tiny, rewriting of Mahabharata in Bengali and all this kind of minor stuff, but nothing worthwhile. And today, what remains of the Pala legacy is that every single day, a murti is dug out. Just yesterday, a Vishnu murti was found from Malda. Almost, if you take the areas of Bihar, Bengal and Bangladesh together, roughly the average is one murti every 2 months. And including Avalokiteshwara, this is the Vamana Vishnu. Vishnus are endless, which points to a very robust Bhagavata Parampara, which doesn't exist anymore. Then Shaivacharyas and lots of these things keep coming to the surface. Temples do not exist because most of the temples were built in brick, just like Gupta period, so they have succumbed. Stones, however, live on. This is like the typical, you go to the Bengal countryside, you will find scenes like this, broken images all across. and also broken temples, a few of them, a little less. This is what remains. To your left, you can see a mihrab of a mosque, the Adina Mosque. It's the mihrab. You know what's a mihrab? When you pray, you have to face the direction of Mecca, and that's why to mark the direction of Mecca, there is usually an edifice which marks that spot. That's kind of like the sacred spot, the marker, like the compass. So this is the mihrab, and you can see on the extreme right is the shrine, which is now in a Western museum. You have the entire Vishnu with the trefoil arches. So basically the other two are mihrabs. So if you see, the Vishnu was taken out, and that area was used as the mihrab. So these two are from the mosques. These two, this one is the original, how it would have looked. This is one of the many Mahaviharas when Hwang Sang or the proper pronunciation Zhuangzang, when he came to India, so he wrote extensive records, many of which have been proved nowadays. So he mentions innumerable viharas and monasteries, and he also the Devalaya of the Tirthikas, which basically means the Hindus. So he mentions, none of which survives. He also mentions wall paintings and all that. So this is Somapura Mahavihara, now in Bangladesh, UNESCO World Heritage Site. This is what remains of the vihara, and this is its artist's reconstruction, how it might have looked when it was intact. This is interesting. This on the left, you can see the picture of a typical Surya Murti, and you see the stele, you have little perforations to drape the deity with dhoti, right? And on the right, you see the first mosque to be built in Bengal in 1300s. You see the stele, you can see the murtis coming out, and on the other murti, they have just inscribed the kalmas, and they have stuck it up in the walls as bricks. So these kind of mosques are very common in Bengal. Quite a few. You can go around, and I mean, there is no question of any doubt. It's open to see, for all to see. Since the fall of the imperial Senas, from that time period up until the coming of the East India Company in the 600 years, it was unbroken foreign rule. Now, many Bengalis would object, because Siraj-ud-Dawla is considered the last Nawab of Bengal, Bihar and Orissa, is considered the last sovereign of Bengal before Bengal fell to the East India Company. But if you look, Siraj-ud-Dawla was Turco-Afghan. His mother tongue was not Bengali. So my simple question to every historian is that how do you call a Turco-Afghan indigenous Bengali ruler? And if you do, then why do you call Robert Clive an aggressor? So this is hypocrisy. This makes no sense. So anyways, between all that time period, only one Hindu king got hold of the throne. He was called Danuja Mardana Raja Ganesh. He ruled for around 4 to 5 years, and the unfortunate tragedy is his own son, after the death of his father, converted to Islam. So this is really a reminiscent of the errors that we Hindus have been doing as a civilization for centuries. So that was in 600 years, only 4 years of indigenous Hindu rule. Now, why am I saying this as an artist is, you need Hindu patronization for Hindu arts to survive. And by Hindu arts, I mean the indigenous art of the land. Now, at this juncture, many people come in and say that, well, Alauddin Hussain Shah, the Sultan of Bengal, did support the translation of Bhagavatam, and which is attested, which is true. But the thing is, the fancy of an Islamic ruler to have a small book translated for his own personal reading does not create a market demand. And unless there is a market demand, you cannot expect art to continue. Me as an artist must be ready to sell my art continuously in order to me to survive. If I cannot sell my art continuously, I will move to a different profession, right? So the court fancy, it's true that many of the Islamic kings did patronize some of the translations, vernaculars and all that, but that was just a curiosity. So that is not sufficient to uphold the indigenous art. And when it comes to art, it takes as little as 70 years for an art to get erased, because let's say I am an artist, I know how a certain Vidya, my son knows it, but I cannot practice it due to certain changed political scenario. My son cannot, and the grandson will never learn it. So this can happen just as little as 60 to 70 years, especially when you take into account that in those days, the life expectancy was pretty short. So 50, 55, most people are gone. So 250 years is a huge time for an art to get extinct. Then we come to the part 2, to the main point, rise of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Tough times give birth to strong men. So, 250 years, we don't have much of fine arts, not much sculptures, except for some few stray references, hardly any temple architecture, and then this man Chaitanya Mahaprabhu takes birth. He was born as Vishwambhar Mishra in Nadia. Nadia, the Navadvip, the ancient town of Navadvip, was already famous for Nyaya Charcha. It was a Nyaya Pitha. Many shlokas attest to this. And he was initially a very famous Tarkika. He used to love debating and defeating his opponents, and everybody used to be scared, like he's a typical Brahmin of the day. But somehow when he went to Gaya once, he had a change of heart and came back with lot of bhakti emotions, and really a changed man, more of a sadhaka than a pandita. And in his lifetime, he was recognized as an incarnation of Sri Krishna, not only by people of Bengal, but also people of Orissa and beyond. So this is a depiction of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his Shadbhuj form, which is, you have the two uppermost green arms, the arms of Rama. Then you have the blue arms, the arm of Krishna. And the lower two arms holding Danda and Kamandalu is the arm of a Yati. So it's a conglomerated, amalgamate form of the divinity. And to his left you see Maharaja Prataparudra, the Kalinga, the king of Odisha. So he was very influential not only in Bengal, even in Odisha. Now we'll come to this beautiful episode. Like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the popular culture has been depicted as somebody who is always crying for love of Krishna, rushing out, tears, premashru and all that. And while all of that is true, none of that is wrong, but there are other shades to these people. So I'll narrate this very famous incident of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Chand Kazi. So when Mahaprabhu was in Navadvip, before he took up sannyasa, he used to gather every night in home of Srivasa Pandita, and they used to have an intimate closed door Sankirtana, where they used to get into bhavas and all that, closed door, because nobody would understand, because these were times when these external shows of bhava was considered taboo. And so many people got really, the pandits, the scholars got really enraged, first because you are doing Harinam vocally. So you are uttering the mantras, and that itself is a sacrilege to them. So they got really offended, and they went and complained to the local Qazi. Now Qazi was also the ruler, the local administrator, and he had all the powers. He can do whatever he wants. So he sent his sepoys, and they came and broke the mridangams and destroyed and all of that. Then what happened is the most unique side of Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu becomes enraged, and he says, he asks all the residents of Navadvip that tonight light a lamp in every courtyard and assemble together when the dusk falls. And hundreds and by the time he was of course popular enough to do that, command that, hundreds and thousands of these Navadvip Vasis, Puravasis, they gather with flaming torches, and they bring all sorts of instruments, cymbals and drums and mridangams, whatever they had, dhak, especially for playing for Durga Puja, and they bring and they start marching with loud Sankirtan. And the Qazi also banned Sankirtan in the town of Nadia, that there should be no Sankirtan. So they start singing aloud and accompanied by those flaming torches, and while the woman greeted with the uludhoni, the ululating sounds, and all conscious. So it's a very graphic scene painted in the biographies, and all of them started marching along the banks of Suradhani Ganga towards the home of Qazi. So it's a very graphic, beautiful scene. When they reach the house of Qazi, seeing that crowd approach, Qazi bolts his doors. And then what happens is even more startling. Mahaprabhu says, bring them and cut off his head. Exact words was this. This is quite startling, because this is not the populist image of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Jhate dhoriyan kati felo matha. Kaat felo, uska matha kaat do. So this matha is mastak. This was his first command. So of course they could not do that because the doors were bolted from inside. So they started breaking the trees in the garden, his disciples, and went on a rampage. Then when, in spite of thumping the doors when the Qazi won't appear, Mahaprabhu said, even more startling, put fire along the house. So this is the spirit of Kshatriya, because this is Mahaprabhu is protesting against the evil, the justice, the injustice. Now the injustice can come in form of hooliganism or in form of organized scriptural recommendation. It can come in any form. So he did that. So this side of Mahaprabhu has been very carefully secluded from the public view. Even 98% Bengalis also don't know about this, because he always is projected as this person who is crying, going in murcha, stambhan, gadagada bhasha and all that, which all of that is true. That's not untrue. But this is the Mahaprabhu. This is the base. So, and it's very similar to Swami Vivekananda. Vivekananda also used to read Christ, but then when this missionary protested, was bad mouthing India and Sanatana Dharma in a ship, he held his collar and said, "One more word, I'll put you in the sea." So this is exactly the same thing. He's not being tolerant of bad things. This is proper dharma. So then, when this happens, when Mahaprabhu says you put fire to the house all along, then Nityananda Prabhu, considered the incarnation of Balaram, his elder brother, he falls at the feet of Mahaprabhu and he says, Prabhu, what are you doing? You can't do this. At the end of the day, you are a Vaishnava. You calm down, you can't do this. You forgive him. And then Mahaprabhu kind of softens, and then by that time, we don't know exactly what happened, if Mahaprabhu gave some, instructions of Abhaya or something, but finally the Qazi emerges and then he falls at his feet. But then Mahaprabhu's change of heart is also visible, because see, at the end of the day, he is not a violent person, he's a sadhaka. So then Mahaprabhu says, you are a chacha, like a chacha to me in terms of village, then why are you doing this adharma? Why are you stopping us from our right, Sankirtana? So then Chandkazi becomes, he gives away his, he takes back his command, ban on some Harinam Sankirtan. He gives a panja, that panja sign that you can do Sankirtan, nobody will stop you. And even today, Gaudiya Vaishnavas use that as the sign. When there is a Sankirtana party, they carry two of those insignias in brass, which stand for Chaitanya and Nityananda. They have forgotten what it actually stands for, but it is actually that Abhaya Danda given by the Qazi, that you can go, nobody will stop you if you hold this in the front. It goes on. So, Chandkazi himself becomes a devout Vaishnava. He writes many Padavalis at the end of his life, and when he passed away, his grave is still there on the other side of Ganga in Mayapur. And it is said that Mahaprabhu himself planted a frangipani tree, and it's a huge thick tree now, and the blooms fall on the grave even now. So, and the songs of Chandkazi, the Vaishnava songs, are still sung. So, compared to this story, I'll also narrate another story of Mahaprabhu's interaction with Yavana Haridas. Yavana Haridas, respectfully called Haridas Thakur by Vaishnavas. Yavana, as you know, is originally a term for the Greeks, but later on in the late medieval period, it was adopted as a term for the Muslims. So he was born Muslim, but he was already devout Hindu. It is said that he used to take 3 lakh Harinam before eating anything in the day. So he was extremely high sadhaka, and so when he was much older to Mahaprabhu, he was already old when Mahaprabhu took sannyas, and he also resided at Puri. And finally, when he passes away, Mahaprabhu takes his body, and gets into this ecstatic dance of Harinam, and with all of the devotees he goes to Mahodadhi, the ocean next to Puri, and bathes his body and says, whoever drinks this water will be saved from Bhavasagara. He is such a great soul. So why I am saying this is because as a Siddha Sadhaka, as a mystic, this is not Dvesha. This is Shatru Bodha. This is a question which one of my Calcuttan students asked to me, that if I am taking others as my enemy, then is it not hate? Will it not affect my own spiritual discipline? So in this context, that's why I exposed this idea that when Vivekananda was holding that missionary, it was not hate towards anything, not to the person, not to Christ also. It was hate, it was just defense and fight for dharma. As simple as that. So this fine nuances Then how Gaudiya Vaishnavism brought about this monumental change in Bengal. After Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he instructed his elder brother Nityananda Prabhu to marry, who was an Avaduta sannyasi, but he told him to marry. Because see, in those days, marriage was the most successful way to preserve a knowledge. So that's why you needed to have this Guru Vamsha, because you have to remember, in Bengal, there was no mathas. Sringeri, Kanchi, the likes of that was gone. So if there is no mathas, who are the institutions? Who will preserve the knowledge? Who will dissipate the knowledge amongst the masses? So this for a long time was done by the Goswami lineages. Now you might ask about the Shakta lineages. The Shakta lineages were also there, but because Shakta Dharma was mainly a little esoteric and guhya, it was secretive, so it was not really spoken, and also there were a lot of mystery elements and a lot of vamachar, so people were not very open about it, and even the grihasthas were not ready to accept it because of this fear factor of the mainstream tantra. So in this vacuum, these Goswami Paramparas became the dominant force of Bengal, the Acharya Vamsas of Bengal. So this is a picture of Vijay Krishna Goswami, who was from the line of Advaita Acharya, one of the five most important, one of the associates of Chaitanya. He became a Brahmo leader, Western educated, then came in contact with Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and went back to being a Gaudiya Vaishnava Acharya and became a Siddha, had lots of realizations and all of that. So these Guru Vamshas were very instrumental, and all the rich people of Bengal took initiation from these Goswamis. So some of these Goswamis are still there in Bengal, especially in Vrindavan area. So their lineage is still continuing. And one of the paramparas you would be interested to know, the parampara of Gopala Bhatta Goswami, primarily in Vrindavan. Gopala Bhatta was the son of a Bhattar of Shri Rangam. So when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was going around in Chaturmasya Kala, he stayed in the house of this priest of Shri Rangam. His little son became really fond of Mahaprabhu, and Mahaprabhu said, when you grow up, come and meet me in Vrindavan. That never happened because Mahaprabhu left his mortal coils. But Gopal Bhatta goes to Vrindavan, settles there. He becomes one of the most distinguished Gaudiya Acharyas, authoring numerous books, Haribhakti Vilasa and all of that. And his lineage is still there in Radharaman Mandir, Vrindavan. So they are an unbroken tradition. What happens with coming of Mahaprabhu, how Hinduism adapts, how Sanatana Dharma adapts, is the rise of the divine feminine within Vaishnavism. This is a unique phenomenon in the history of Indian religion, because before Mahaprabhu, all the Vaishnava paramparas were revolving around Vishnu, or at the best Krishna. But for the first time, the Radha comes. Some historians say that she is the natural, byproduct of Shaktism and Vaishnavism, intertwining in the land of Bengal. So Radha was there from a little earlier. It's not that she was invented by Mahaprabhu. She was there for quite a time. But to develop Radha as a self-sufficient goddess, with her own dhyana mantra, with her own puja, and to place her in a position above Krishna. That was a contribution of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, Jiva Goswami, and all these acharyas. So emergence of Radha became very popular, and it was almost like infusing a new, fresh, mellow rasa to the ailing religion, and also this helped in the real development of Madhur Bhava. The Gaudiya Vaishnavism has explored Madhur Bhava perhaps like nobody else, no other parampara has. They have gone really depth. Now what is Madhur Bhava? Those who don't know, you can approach God as Shanta, Dasya, as a servant, Vatsalya, Sakhya, and Madhur. As Sakhya is as a friend and as a lover, Madhur. So, and Gaudiya Vaishnavas treat Madhur Bhava as the highest form, because Madhur, all the rest of the bhavas are there. So when you love somebody as a lover, you are also a bit of a mother, you are a bit of a friend, and a bit of a das. So that's why that was a science. And also it had the Bhagavat Pramana, where gopis are being exalted as, the highest bhaktas and all of that. So Radha Krishna Upasana becomes the mainstream Upasana. It becomes very popular. It goes across entire Bengal. and the new form of temple architecture emerges. This architecture is completely different from architecture which Bengal knew 250 years back during the Senapala period. Now, Krishna is close to you. He is no longer a god, he is a man. So if he's a human, he has to live like a human. So inspired by the traditional huts of Bengal, the traditional Chala architecture, these kind of temples started to be built, especially around the town of Vishnupur, and then eventually to all of Bengal. So it was like bringing together of, bringing the gods close. So that was a phenomenal achievement, and that style of temple architecture really became popular. You see how it becoming more complex. From just 4 roofs, it is now 8 roofs. This is Art Chala. Chala is just, Chal means roof. So that's how it's shaped. And you have these, but see how the classical elements are also surviving, distorted but not wiped off. See, this is Yalis. Yali motifs, but still surviving. But we Bengalis call it the lions. So our traditional lions are shaped like this. So it's not, everything does not get wiped off, but it becomes greatly distorted and evoluted. Temples like this exist in all corners of Bengal. So you can see this is from Vishnupur. These are the carvings. You see Rama Ravana with the thing, and so it's all these different carvings. They're all very small though. They are this tiny. Each figure would be around just 4-5 inches. So this is not big carving. This is the Rasa Mandala. You see Radha with Krishna with 2 Sakhis, and then one Krishna, one Sakhi, one Krishna, one Sakhi, forming the, Bara Nritya or whatever you call it, that kind of many Nrityas, Ganesha would be able to say, are mentioned in the old text. Such kind of temples exist all throughout Bengal countryside, numerous, and most of them abandoned because these temples were being funded by the small rajas and zamindars. Now, one way Hinduism survived is decentralizing of Hindu thought and Hindu polity. What happened was these rajas or zamindars were most of the time, they were vassal states of the main Islamic ruler. So the Islamic ruler would not interfere with their own allies. This is one condition. The second is, the temples were not very huge, because by that time in the Pala period, they used to bring stones from the Bihar via Ganga. Now they cannot bring stones because now they are just locked up in each district. So they had to rely on the local materials, which is earth. Bengal, like the Ganges and Brahmaputra Delta, so abundant clay. So you dig soil, make it to terracotta and make the temples. But with terracotta temples, you can't make it very large, because the plinth won't be able to take the weight of that bigger construction. So 60, 70 feet, 80 feet is the maximum, not more than that. So temples were not very grand as compared to the stupas and the earlier Pala temples. So they were small, but you will find them in huge numbers. And when the temples are small, it also kind of evades the Islamic invasions. And also most of the times they were centered around the palace ground. So you will still find there will one Rajbari, the palace, and then there is a temple nearby. So of course invading a temple is almost like invading your private property. So that's how this decentralization happened, and numerous temples started to be built, but without much risk. I mean, I wouldn't say no risk, but relatively less. And you can see how the Chala architecture has influenced the pan-Indian architecture. This is the classic Chala Chandi Mandapa where Durga Puja take place, which is still only 2 of the such structures are still there. And then how it has influenced the terracotta temples, how it goes to the Rajput architecture through Akbar, who takes artisans from Bengal to make his fort. In fact, the word bungalow comes from Bangla, and Bangla comes from Bangla. So this was, the style was so popular, so it kind of became really a popular trend in North India, and eventually once it had its hold on the Mughal art and Rajput art, it spread elsewhere also. And you can see a Gurudwara, the same motif. The other most phenomenal thing that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did was the reinvention of Vrindavan. Because Vrindavan, it might sound surprising to us, was lost. It was not there physically present. Like one of the acharyas of Goswami acharyas of Vrindavan was telling to me, Suvarna Goswami, that Vrindavan was there in everybody's hearts. So every region would have their own Vrindavan. Like for the South Indians, Sri Rangam is the Vrindavan. But the Vrindavan of Krishna was lost. So Mahaprabhu, it is said, he went. Mathura was there though. Mathura never went out of habitation. It was a continuously inhabited place. There have been a lot of destructions, but it was rebuilt over and over again. But Vrindavan was lost. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went with the target of relocating Vrindavan. He sat, that place is still preserved at Imli Tala on the banks of Yamuna, and he had this vision of spiritual vision that this is the lost Vrindavan. Of course, he is a person who used to get into ecstasy, so he does not have the power to revive it. He goes back to Puri and sends his Roop, Sanatan and all these disciples to go and revive Vrindavan. So it is under the disciples of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the direct disciples, the Vrindavan is revived. Now, there is, like in India, there are contenders of this theory also, because there are many paramparas originating in Vrindavan. So many of them say that Vrindavan was already there. Mahaprabhu just popularized it. But historical evidence, as far as the historical evidence go, the first temples of Vrindavan are all belonging to the Gaudiya Parampara. This is the first temple to be built. This was the temple of Madan Mohan. And the tale has it that Vajranabh, the grandson of Sri Krishna, had built a couple of deities, 4 Shivas, 4 Devis and 4 Krishna Murtis, and installed them in different places around Vrajamandal. Vrajamandal is a huge Chaurasi Kos, 84 Krosha area where they have installed. And over time, they got lost, and it is said that it is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his disciples and also Madhavendra Puri and all, they rediscovered through sadhana these murtis from the soil. So that's how Vrindavan was revived. This was the first deity to be revived by Advaita Acharya, and then first temple to be built, and of course desecrated by Aurangzeb 3 generations later. So just on the banks of Yamuna. Now if you go to the temple, and this hillock still exists, but the Yamuna has kind of moved away. But with the rediscovery of Vrindavans, a phenomenal thing happens in North India. If you notice, the Radha Krishna cult expands like wildfire through North India, and it almost engulfs. If you go to Rajputana, most of these royal families, their traditional deities were Devi, but now most of them worship Radha Krishna, Govindaji and all. So the origin of this Radha Krishna cult was also from Vrindavan, but that was also shared heritage by other paramparas also, because once the Vrindavan was established, other saints started coming. Most famous of them is Mirabai. Mirabai was just 1 generation after Mahaprabhu, I think 60-70 years after him. So Mirabai, Surdas, and there was an explosion of saints coming in, and that kind of really catapulted the Radha Krishna Jugala Upasana, Karshnya form of Vaishnavism, to spread to all over India. And that's why you won't find too much of Radha down here. But North India is almost like consumed by Radha. And also another change happens in the Indian psyche. Radha becomes the quintessential Sanskrit Naika and replaces Devi in a way. Because before, you will find all the Shastras are celebrating Uma Maheshwar, all the Rasa Shastras are related to Uma Maheshwar. Suddenly, Uma becomes the mother. I mean, she loses almost, if I may, I don't know if Sir will be a better, this is an audacity for me to say, but from superficial observations that I have done, no more literature is written regarding the Sringara or Naika Bhava of Devi. Devi becomes restricted only to Uma, and Radha comes out of Uma to take that position, that I am the Naika of India henceforth. So anything, any love lore, any thumri, whatever needs to be written, Radha becomes the protagonist. So that kind of development happens. But well, the Vaishnavas won't agree. The Vaishnavas say Radha and Devi is different, but there are numerous slokas in Puranas, such as Devi Bhagavata and also in Tantra, which establish the unity of Devi Tattva and Radha Tattva. So anyways, that is spiritual stuff. And this is again the another temple, Radha Ballav temple. You know, the temple of Radha Ballav, which you see the Premananda Maharaj nowadays. You are very common. So their parampara worships Radha Ballav. This is the original temple. These temples are all being built in Vrindavan around the same time, and you can see the elements which you also find in Fatehpur Sikri. So if you see, the pillars here have still bears some Hindu influence. Then you have the Rajasthani bracket and the Indo-Islamic kind of arches. So it's all a conglomeration, these kind of temples. Even this was attacked, so this is now an abandoned temple. And another thing that happened was Baul Parampara. Now the word Baul comes from the Sanskrit word Vatul, which means kind of to be mad, intoxicated, that's what I have heard. So Bauls were mystic, and they had several strains of thought. They were originally partly Vaishnavas, partly Nath Parampara, partly the Charyapadas. Charyapadas is from the Palad period, the Buddhist Siddhacharyas, the Buddhist Tantrikism also kind of entered. And then there was also a little bit of Sufism, they say, later on it came in. And there are different paramparas of Baul, some more inclined towards Sufism, some more inclined to Vaishnavism. But all of them agree that Nityananda Prabhu is our father. So Bauls have a very strong Vaishnava connect, but because of their tantric tendencies and Deha Sadhana, the mainstream Gaudiyas do not accept them, and they consider them as upper paramparas, asampradayas, that kind of, bad sampradayas or deviations. But anyways, Bauls held a very important position because they were this wandering minstrel going from one village to other, singing the songs, mystic songs, collecting alms, and propagating the message of love and this breaking the caste barriers also, because when you have a common enemy, you can't keep up your own internal fight. So that's also one of the reason that this barriers, I would again, caste is let's say the distortions of Varna, what we had become, because caste is again not a right word maybe. So Bauls still exist. This is, you can see Bob Dylan and Purnadas Baul, who was really the first one who took Baul out of Bengal and to the west and all. Lakshman Das Baul and Purnadas Baul, and this is Parvati Baul, many of you know, who is becoming very famous nowadays, and also because she is one of the Bauls who sings and also practices. So Baul Sadhana became very popular, and it was instrumental in bringing together different factions. So that is also how Bengal, the Sanatana Dharma, survived. Then there was the birth of the Patachitra tradition, the Bengal's own tradition of painting. An outburst of themes, Radha, Krishna, Sakhis, and this kind of. So this still exists, but in a largely distorted format. And if you look, the result of Gaudiya Vaishnavism is that in entire India, surprisingly, Bengal has the fourth highest number of temples. And these are all temples, but maybe not as big as South Indian ones, but similar to what photos you just saw. And there was also one more thing. Many of them, these temples are in a dilapidated state. They are not in a good condition though, because the zamindaris have gone. So, and especially in Bangladesh, most of the temples are abandoned and broken, because in 47 and 71, most of the Hindus fled to Bengal, and also the Dhakeshwari, the patron deity of the Dhaka, is now in Kumatuli in Calcutta. She had to be airlifted in a secret plane in 1947 and brought secretively to Calcutta, and she still stays there. Very few people know of her. So she's a goddess, Mahishasuramardini deity. Anyways, so this is a report. And also Mahaprabhu introduced a lot of new festival. One of the festivals that was newly introduced was Ras Yatra. Because Dole Yatra, which will be in 3rd of March, Dole Yatra is like the Dolotsavam of South India. It's a swing festival, and also the coming of the monsoon, the Vasant and the Holi. We call Holi by that name. So that was already there. But Ras Yatra was a completely new festival, because the elevating the Ras as the highest tattva comes from Gaudiya Siddhanta. So Gaudiya said that Ras, because Madhura, out of all the sadhanas, bhakti is the best. Out of bhakti, Madhura Bhava is the best. And in the Madhura Bhava, gopis are the best. And within the Gopi Leela, Ras is the highest. So that's why Ras needed to be celebrated. So how do they celebrate Ras? So they started building these special temples called Rasa Mancha. Rasa Mancha is a special edifice, a temple, not very big, it can be small, or the largest ones are about the size of this hall. So they would have, it's built just for 2 days. So the deities of the temple, or if there are many deities in a village, all these Radha Krishnas would be brought and placed in that mancha. It will be octagonal usually. So each of the faces of the 8 faces would have a Radha Krishna, and there would be special puja accompanied by homa and all. And then the entire night people would sing, dance, merry-make, Bhagavat part, religious drama. So staying awake the whole night. Celebrate. So basically reenacting Krishna's Ras. And when you bring many deities together, it is also replicating the fact of Rasa, where Krishna expands as many Krishnas. So that Ekam Vahusyami, that is becoming the format. So these kind of new festivals was introduced. It still continues, Rasa Purnima. This is how Bengal. And also there was one thing that is very important, the introduction of dance, music and dance. The reason why we were talking that why the festivals of North India sometimes have more jubilation, and in South it's more inward, somber. That's because I think this is speculative, we can't prove it, but one possible reason is that when you are faced in adverse situation, it's when you are having to pay a fraction, I think 1/5 or 1/3 of your earning as jizya, just to continue be a Hindu, right? When you have to pay that much, so it's definitely not easy times. And the rich can pay 1/3 of the 1/3 or 1/5. I'm forgetting the exact amount. So that is fine. A rich can pay, but for the poor, the easy way is to convert, right? So in that situation, it's very important to give some joy, and Sanatanic joy. So it's very important. So that is where Mahaprabhu said dance. I mean, dance was always there, but it was codified dance, it was regulated dance, and singing and dancing unabashedly was not, it's not considered a sign of good culture. But after Mahaprabhu and the spread of Bhakti movement, like Mahaprabhu is hailed as Sankirtana Pitarau, so the father of Sankirtan. So after the spread of Mahaprabhu, this song and dance become so popular. If you go to North India, especially North India Vrindavan, you sit in a bhajan, the ladies, suddenly they will get up, cover the face in ghungat, and they will start dancing. So this is irony, because the covering comes from parda, but the dance comes from Sanatana. So that's how the Hindus adapted themselves to the changing times. And also another very important thing that happened was the concept of Hridaya Vrindavan. Internalizing the rituals, because you don't have a matha, you don't have a guru, you don't have a temple. So the best you can do is do everything in your mind or inside your home. So that is about the same time you see the birth of the Vrindavan, or as we call in Bengal, the Tulsi Mancha. So this is the platform of Tulsi. So that is a pan-Indian phenomenon, especially in North India and Bengal. So it's very popular. I think here also it's equally popular. So when you have a Tulsi Vrindavan, you can just sit, and it's Sakshat Lakshmi, Sakshat Krishna, Hari stays there, so you can do what you want to do to your heart's content. And also the concept of Hridaya Vrindavan, which the Bauls say continuously. They say Moned Manush and Hridaya Vrindavan. So Moned Manush is the man of your heart. Now it doesn't necessarily mean your lover. not in not like your date. It means the Guru, the Paramatma, the Parama Purusha. It is used in that way. So they would actually, the Bauls interacted in this code language that have you found your Moner Manush? So there is this way. So there is a beautiful song, Milan hobe koto dine, kitna din mein milan hoga, amar moner manusher shange. When will I be united with my moner manus, man ka manush. Chato ko pray ahor nishi, like I'm staying ahar nishi, like chatak a bird waiting for the waters. Che ache kalo shoshi, and all these are a beautiful song. So these are written in dual languages, code languages. So these kind of esoteric mystical concepts became a rage in Bengal, which eventually would give rise to the Shakta Bhakti traditions. Then also there was an outburst of literary activities, the Padavali Kirtan of Bengal. We were also in a private gathering yesterday, we were talking about that, where the different leelas of Krishna, the Valya Leela, the Goshtha Leela, like the tending to the cows, the Govardhan Dharan, the Rasa Leela, Nauka Leela, these all started being sung, and beautifully. Like for example, in the Nauka Leela, the gopis take their merchandise of curd and everything, goes to cross to sell the heart of Mathura to cross. They were unable to find a boat. So Krishna quickly, through the help of Yogamaya, creates a boat and comes to take them. And then he says, what would you give me? What is the price of carrying a queue across? Then he said, we can give 1 anna. 1 anna. Then he said, no, 1 anna is not possible. Then 2 annas. They slowly bargain. And then there's a meaning when they say 2 anna, Krishna said, no, 2 anna means a feet in both the boats. You will sink that way. Then finally they agree at 16 annas. 16 anna makes 1 rupee. So basically 16 anna man dene se Krishna milega. So this way they have beautiful, and this is done like a music and talk. So one line of music, then explanation, talk, and this way the whole drama is enacted for the devout. And when they finally get onto the boat, the Krishna rows it to the middle of the river, and then he says, then a storm comes. And then he said, okay, you have to throw away everything or else the boat will sink. And then the gopis had to throw away the jewelries and everything, and also their merchandise. That is basically letting go of your possessions, the symbol of that. But even then, the boat, the accident could not be averted. The boat capsizes, and Yamuna had long been wanting to touch the lotus feet of Radha and Krishna. So that was Krishna's way of making both the Yugala Charana do the Yamuna Sparsha. So this way they have beautiful explanations, which was also a part of the cultural thing. And I'll give you one beautiful example of the Kirtan tune. This was first pointed out by Suman Bhattacharya, famous Kirtan exponent. Kirtan ends like Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Gaur Hari Bol, Gaur Hari Bol, Gaur Hari Bol. And this is adapted in the national anthem, Jaya He, Jaya He, Jaya He, Jaya 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 He. So that one. So this is a influence of this Bengali Kirtan tradition on Rabindranath Tagore. In fact, Rabindranath Tagore, in his when he was 20-21, he was so captured by Vidyapati and these mystical poets of the songs of Ramakrishna's love songs of Gaudiya literature, that he started mimicking and writing his own literature, and he called Bhanu Simha, Rabindranath Bhanu Simha Padavali. So he also composed that. So anyway, so this song traditions are very rich, which has influenced and it has really developed a lot. Because see, you have to understand, before this, the classical paramparas of song and dance were almost extinct. We have references to Devadasi's dancing. Mahua Mukherjee madam of Gaudiya Nritya has developed all these. She has dug out all these resources in the ancient Shastras, where they mention huge temples to Kartikeya, Devadasi's dancing in 7-floor temples, but that's unthinkable in Bengal right now, or for the last 500 years also. So the classical paramparas are all extinct. So then this is being revived in a new way. So that's why they're so valuable. And this is you see in Shantipur, one of the sacred places associated with this movement. And on the Rasa Yatra, they still light up the houses like with candles. These are not electric lights, just candles. So then comes the influence of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu on the Shakta Bengali tradition. This is Ram Prasad Sen, the only one of his Patachitra paintings. And Ram Prasad Sen gets inspired by the prevalent Vaishnava Bhakti traditions of so soft, mellowed rasa. And he starts infusing Bengal's Shakta Dharma with the same spirit. So this, from now on, Shakti devotionalism becomes very popular, which is something that is not found in the rest of India. Because Shakti is found all over, but this kind of love songs, where you are abusing the mother, it's very rare to come by. And also there is a group of Shakta Sangeet called the Agamani Sangeet. In the Agamani Sangeet, you are actually waiting for Devi Durga to come, and you are accusing that Shiva, that you are a beggar. So you have made my Gauri, Ma Menaka, the wife of Himalayas, the mother of Uma, she is accusing Shiva that you have made her Kali. She has to roam crematoriums with Bhiksha Patra. So these kind of songs, and so beautiful songs are there, very interesting. And also Vijaya, when the Uma is about set to leave on Navami, she's crying and saying, I will dress up Uma as a male child. I'll remove the Mundamala and put Vanamala and put a yellow dhoti, take off her sword and put a Vasuri and put a peacock feather so nobody can understand. So that way they are actually establishing the sameness of Krishna and Kali. So these kind of beautiful devotional songs are come into existence. This is also a collateral, evolution. It's an unintended evolution of, just because these two traditions existed side by side. Shantiniketan Dolotsav, very famous nowadays, very sanitized version of Dol, but this comes from the influence of the Gaudiya Vaishnava movement. You can see the kartal, very typical religious, the manjiras being used. And Manipuri culture, which we know, is actually an extension of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's tradition. The Manipuris are all Chaitanya Upasakas. So they were initiated by the Goswamis of Bengal around 500 years ago. Raja Bhagya Chandra, he got converted, and then he converted his kingdom as Vaishnavas. And you can imagine 400 years ago, Manipur would have been a primarily tribal land. So naturally, the philosophy and they would have been a tribal land, and Bengal would have been very refined. Now it's the opposite, I guess. Unfortunately, so Bengal would have been really refined, a place to go, because so one thing we have to understand as Sanatana bearers of this ancient civilization is you can influence people when you are prosperous, civil, and aesthetic. Powerful, yes. So political power, aesthetics has to be there. You have to be prosperous. You cannot be a beggar. Then people will follow you. So when Southeast Asia got converted to Hinduism and also Buddhism, they had an India to look up to. And just see what happens when India falls. When India falls with the coming of Islam, they had no big father to look up to. So they leaves their religion and they converts to Islam. Because the inspiration, if your guru becomes, stale, then obviously if some other people come and say that, well, I have a better religion, I'll take that religion. I have nobody to look up to. And now because America and the West is powerful, we are all aping America. So it's extremely important for India to get back. I think powerful it is already becoming. Prosperity will come in another 100 years completely. Aesthetics is what we have to really work on, because I think we are really at the lowest level of aesthetics as far I think. Because if you go back 100 years, even the rural villages looked so beautiful. The poorest people had the most beautiful huts. And today if you take a drive around India anywhere, the poorest people have the ugliest huts. Even the richest have the ugliest home. What to speak of the poor? So I think there is a horrible decimation of aesthetics, and this is not just in visual arts, in every way. So I mean, this should be a topic of discussion. What went wrong? India and aesthetics, what went wrong? Because when India was reeling under colonialism, when it was at its lowest place, like economically, morally, we still did not lose aesthetics. So just the other day I was looking at the oil paintings at Mysore Kalyana Mandapa, Mysore Palace, and I was wondering, because one of my students said that, sir, Bengal, so they have this beautiful paintings of the Mysore Dasera, right? And everything is aesthetic. If you see, even if you see an English shop, the ladies standing on the second floor are wearing all the traditional saris, the men in the traditional turbans. So he was painting from life, but he didn't change it too much. It was aesthetics were there. But if I am to paint an Indian art today, what will I paint? How can I make jeans and t-shirt look aesthetic? Although I do wear jeans and t-shirt, I'm not, but we are victims. So how do I make a person in jeans and t-shirt look graceful enough to be counted as art? Indian art, at least. This is the question. So I think, the aesthetics have really suffered. So India needs to work on that and see how beautifully they have preserved their aesthetics. So Manipuri culture, you just look and, gape at it. You get, completely mesmerized. Just the other day, this Bollywood star Randeep Hooda got married to a Manipuri girl, and those images were there in Facebook, and beautiful. Everybody was looking because it's different. So this is again the far-reaching effects of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and that's about it. So I think that's how we have survived, and I think we need to so the case of Bengal is also, I'll finish with this conclusion, the case of Bengal is also the case for India at large, because let us not forget that in spite of the triumph of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, half of Bengal has been lost. If you ask me how lost, Bangladesh. Now if you ask why it is lost, any country that does any landmass which originally belonged to our civilization and no longer believes in the same values of our civilization is a lost land. Afghanistan, Gandhari Gandhari of Mahabharata was from Gandhar. She was a product of our civilization. But you go to Kandahar, just today the Taliban was, destroying the rababs and tablas and all today. They were searching. I came to know in the news. So that is not the ethos of our land, destroying musical instrument. So that is because it is no longer our land. So it is a warning sign. So Bengal, more than half of Bengal is already lost. So every other community, including our own Bengalis, should understand with the correct balance of Shatru Bodha, not getting into hate. It's not a hate per se, but a thorough understanding of what is wrong and where to stand up and fight and resist if you are to make our culture go on. Because even Pakistan is India, but it does not have anything that belongs to India, because it has given up its bindi, it has given up its Deepavali, it has given up its Holi, it has given up its sari. Even in 70s they used to wear sari. Now they no longer wear sari. It has also given up its sur sadhana. They don't do any more classical music. They don't do Kathak. So basically, whatever was going on in identity of India does not exist in Pakistan, or even if it does, it exists in minuscule quantities. So that is disruption of the thread of continuity. So unless the thread of continuity runs, it will be a disaster for our civilization. So this is something that we should take note. And with this thought, I will end my speech.
I have nothing to supplement, as my esteemed scholar, artist friend Shri Halley Goswami so beautifully and so arrestingly impressive speech has been given by him, and that's why I have nothing more to supplement. But this much can be said: so great and rich was the tradition of Bengal, even since many centuries. By the time of Palas and Senas, as we know, there are so many Sanskrit poets one example of that is the earliest known compilation of Subhashitas, beautiful verses. They are standalone verses being collected and compiled in thousands of number by Vidyakara, the oldest available text of compilations, and then Sadukti Karnamrita of Sridhara Dasa, Subhashita Ratnakosha of Vidyakara, a Buddhist, and then Sridhara Dasa, another perhaps Vaishnavite or Shaivite, we don't know. He has compiled all beautiful verses belong to all deities of Sanatana Dharma without any disparity, without any separatism. And there we get to know more than 300 great poets' names. So many beautiful verses. We don't know anything about their other writings apart from these two collections, where Sridhara Dasa came later and Vidyakara was the earlier one. Before 1000 years he did. All that happened before the invasion of Bhakti Khilji. For example, poets like Vasukalpa, Chittapa, Yogeshwara, like wonderful poems, beautiful poems. And some of the distinctive features of these poems are very beautiful description of our rural life. Usually we say that Sanskrit poets are averse to rural life and the reality of that life, and they are all just restricted to palatial buildings and also supernatural things, many heavens and apsaras and so many such things. But there in the verses of Yogeshwara or Vasukalpa and these poets, we have so many intimate pictures of rural life in a very chaste and very arresting Sanskrit language, which is very ornate. The meter is bombastic. The use of Sanskrit is flawless to the last decimal place. And yet it is so intimate with the rural pictures, and also very heart-throbbing pictures of poverty and misery and such things, which have been presented so beautifully. In art, everything will be beautiful. That is what we get to know from such verses. They are hundreds in number. But nothing apart from these verses are remaining. It means we can imagine what is the extent of destruction, what is the extent of that invasion that has happened. And we Indians are blissfully ignorant about all these things. And even not many Sanskritists have thrown any great light on that. There are some Sanskritists, very good scholars. They try to say that in Sanskrit we had one separate Lokadhara tradition, that is the folk tradition, and the other one which is the court tradition. These two are opposed to each other, very easy handmaids that have been used for all that. This folk tradition is something against the classical tradition, and any folk tradition is a rebellion, and classical tradition is the oppressor, and this is the oppressed, something like that. But we don't find, when we study such things, we don't find any such things. So many times using these two features as folk and classical, the very terminology itself is wrong. It is Marga and Deshi. And Deshi is an Avishkara and Marga is a Sakshatkara. Deshi is the workplace and Marga is the place of realization. Marga is the internal realization and Deshi is the external expression. And both are inseparable. That's how it has gone in. And nowhere in those poems we find any such conflict. Nowhere in Indian tradition, whether it is in any languages, we find such demarcation and such conflict as such. But nothing of that has been told. Bengal stands as a beautiful testimony for all these things. And also the supposed to be conflict between Buddhism and Sanatana Dharma. It is again a misnomer, as you have beautifully showed. So many Vishnu images are available in Pala tradition. How can Vishnu be respected and worshipped when Buddhism is being the state religion? That only Buddha or Vishnu should answer. And this Navayana, it has even discarded Hinayana, let alone Mahayana. All yanas are discarded, and that's how this is yana without any wheels. Without this real essence of Dharma Chakra that is being advocated as a yana, as a vehicle, how come it is possible? And the basic essence of Shamadamadi Shatka and Sadhana Chatushtaya, if it is not incorporated, what is the fancy behind any such religion, any such religious practice, or any such philosophy as such? Social movements cannot become philosophies. Social aggression or outrage cannot become a system of religion or worship or whatsoever unless chittam idam shantam yasya na sana yogi. Unless the mind is pacified, no such spiritual endeavor can happen. So these are the problems which are burning issues, and all these things have been very well suggested and touched upon by our erudite scholar speaker. And one more thing, while he was speaking, I had one thought. I leave it for I submit it for the further discussion of our scholar friends here, for very many in this hall. From the paintings and from the sculptures all around India, in South India, in Eastern India, and also in Central India, and even in Northern India, as we are away from the classical tradition of Natya Shastra, rigidity in painting and rigidity in sculpture, and more than such beautiful dynamics, it has been reduced to very, very dull and morbid static expressions that we get to know. For example, how beautiful was our dance sculptures even during the time of Hoysalas in South India, and even during the time of Cholas, and also in the time of Palas and Chandelas and Gurjar Pratiharas and so many such rulers who ruled before the invasion of Islam. And once the invasion happened, not only dance, even painting and sculpture became truncated. Yes. The traditional Mysore style of painting and the Tanjavur style of painting, that is best example. No dynamism. Everything is hefty and everything is one stone being heaped upon another stone, something like that. In Kannada I used to say, chapati muddenu ondra mele ಒಂದು ಇಟ್ಟು ಮಾಡಿರೋ ಥರ ಕಾಣಿಸುತ್ತೆ. Means no dynamism. You look into the modern, these medieval traditions of dance, all that has been beautifully researched and revealed by the great legendary artist Dr. Padma Subramaniam, and also the invasion and its results, and how Vijayanagar took its responsibility, that has been done by Dr. Gayatri Kandan also under the guidance of Dr. Padma Subramaniam. So painting or sculpture is arrested dance, and dance is nothing but unleashed painting and sculpture. That's how it goes on. They are hand in hand. When these things are happening, so even the religious practices, even the worship practices, all these things will become more rigid, will become more closeted, will become more conformist. That is what we see. Earlier, Shanmata used to be everywhere. You told beautifully about the worship of Parvati as a heroine went to backseat and Radha came to existence. That is very true. In Sanskrit literature, classical literature, up to 7th or 8th century, everywhere we see so much of Shiva Stuti and so much of Parvati Stuti. For that matter, most of the classical Sanskrit poets, irrespective of their devotion, they have beautifully composed many, many verses on Shiva, Parvati, their romances, their dalliance, and many such things. And you mentioned the name of Vijaya, that is found since the time of Vishakadatta and since the time of Somadeva and other people. So the classical tradition, it is giving a very broad-based picture of Sanatana Dharma. As the invasions they crop up, we become pocketed. Shaiva is one separate group, Vaishnava is another separate group, and the very sacred duty of Vaishnava is to hate Shaiva and vice versa. If the God is so poor enough not to take the form of other, how can he be all-pervading and Sarvavyapi and Sarvashakta? The great Rangapriya Mahadeshika, embodiment of Samanvaya in this land of Karnataka, who moved around before 5-10 years, he says, and he was quoting his master's words, Sriranga Mahaguru, he says, when Vishnu comes, it should be taken as Shiva coming in the guise of Vishnu, and when Shiva is coming, it is Vishnu coming in the guise of Shiva. And even dogs, by sniffing, they will be knowing who is their masters. And we people, we Vaishnavas, Shaivas, if we are unable to recognize our masters just by feeling them, just by feeling the divine odor, just barking about the other person, looking at the other person and then screaming, what is nonsense, what is more ridiculous than this? He says, your naigalginta kade. That's how he mentioned in one lecture of him. This is how the sectarian attitude, that is first calamity and the first hurdle that has to be overcome in rebuilding modern India, in rebuilding that, and also to gain the aesthetics what we have lost. You pointed out so beautifully and so tellingly, it is true. We have lost. I always notice when we lose track of our meters in poetry, because my main forte is supposed to be literature, when once we lose chandas, a dancer losing rhythm, a musician losing shruti, then what happens? It is avalaya and apaswara. Even our so-called folk poetry, it's full of rhythm. One great doyen of not only literature, even journalism and even all-round Indian culture, Dr. S.R. Ramaswamy, he says, our illiterate, so-called illiterate village women, whenever they uttered folk songs, they were all in perfect meter. They were all set in perfect meter, whether it is the Adiprasa, Antiprasa, everything was taken care of. But the university wits, all guiding PhDs and occupying high positions and amassing hefty salaries, when they write, it's devoid of meter, it's devoid of aesthetics. This is what? This is the Western education that has happened, because I know no European language, whether it is Latin or Greek, he has to cut a sorry face in front of the metrical varieties of India. Metrical varieties of Indian languages, whether it is Sanskrit or regional language or whatsoever. Then what we have to learn from them regarding meter, regarding rhythm, diction and other things. But that Macaulay's education that has made us lose our roots and ape something which is not worthwhile. Certainly we have to take something very useful, to think of original themes and other things and adopt the theme, something like a novel and Bankim Chandra has wonderfully adopted that novel. Perhaps he is the first novelist in India in the modern languages to write. And whether in Durgesh Nandini or in Anand Mata or so, we do find the chaste classical structure of a Gadya Kavya. And all the ornate expressions of Alankara and everything is found. This is how we can make use of the influence of West in a positive manner. And your lecture has given impetus to so many such things. That's why on behalf of all these learned people in the assembly, I with folded hands, thank you. Thank you. Namaste.